If I saw poop in a toilet, I would be okay with that. It's all right for poop to be in the toilet. I'd have it nowhere else. But if I saw poop on my kitchen counter,
Holy butt Where the did this come from?
I would freak out about it. Seems straightforward, right? But what if I were to tell you that's how we've dealt with the homeless crisis in America? For the longest time, it's been preferring poop on the kitchen counter. If you'll pardon the unflattering comparison, let's have a cynical talk about the problem of homelessness in the United States. Let's begin with 3 ways the problem of homelessness can be dealt with. And I'll start with how I'd prefer we handle it. The first way we can deal with the homeless is by giving them suitable housing, ideally combined with social services for those who need them. But that's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money, right? We'll just keep this in mind and move on to the second way we can deal with homelessness, which is by letting homeless run its course. And by this, I mean allowing the homeless to be a big blight on our communities, tolerating their squalor, dodging their biohazard waste, stepping over their drug paraphernalia, scaring away customers for local business, and discouraging use of our public spaces. All of this while dealing with the horror of watching the homeless die in slow motion right before our eyes. This is what I mean when I say we've been preferring poop on the kitchen counter. A romanticized ethic of rugged individualism is so pervasive in American culture that we shrug the problem as a personal failing, a failing that we aren't responsible in fixing. But even appealing to our most base selfishness, we'd really rather not have to face this. Which brings us to the last way we can handle homelessness, which is to manage the problem through a municipal response. It goes hand in hand with the second solution of tolerating homelessness, though sometimes we are intervening with paramedics and hospital stays. Treating them as the trauma of being homeless takes a medical toll. Local intervention can also come in the way of local authorities handling homelessness, utilizing various vagrancy, trespassing, and drug laws, where police, jails, courts, and prisons get involved in managing offenders. But the truth be told, this is just housing the homeless in the most expensive manner possible. So, does it make sense to keep handling the homeless crisis the way we have been? If we're willing to spend more money to basically warehouse them, then maybe the solution of providing housing doesn't seem like such a terrible idea from a business standpoint. Social science has resoundingly answered that after an initial investment in acquiring public housing, housing the homeless is less costlier on local resources than managing homelessness through first responders and policing it in a number of meaningful metrics. The University of North Carolina in Charlotte looked at 85 chronically homeless adults that received permanent housing in the Moore Place from the Urban Ministry Center. They discovered that by housing these individuals, they saved $1.8 million from local resources in its first year, with recipients making fewer trips to the emergency room and spending fewer days in hospitals from the year prior. Unconditional housing also led to plummeting arrests and fewer days spent in jail. A San Diego study concluded that a modest savings on mental health care costs for the homeless through housing resulted in a tremendous reduction in emergency service inpatient care services that shifted towards more use of outpatient care and made a reduction in mental health services provided through the criminal justice system. A comprehensive meta-analysis on the cost savings offsets of housing solutions found that most studies have observed decreases in justice costs, as the homeless are often arrested for offenses connected to their survival strategies. After this realization, a lot more people get on board with shelter being the solution, but hesitate at treating it as a handout or avoid creating a state of dependency. So we're going to look at 2 approaches behind how a housing solution might be implemented. Any plan may fall into either a housing-first model or a treatment-first model. In a treatment-first approach, housing is conditionally given upon the recipient committing to sobriety or mental health treatment. This is under a doctrine of understanding that the bulk of individuals who become or remain homeless is owed to chemical dependency and mental illness. And only after they overcome these will they be equipped to return to being self-sustaining members of society, often with an expectation that the housing they'll be given will be transitionary. A housing-first approach, on the other hand, provides housing without preconditions and is meant to be permanent. Sobriety and better mental health outcomes can take place after the individual is removed from the traumatic experience of being homeless. They are not bound to be drug-free to keep their housing, and that might be a problem with a housing-first model. Or is it? Look, the cause of homelessness is much more ranging and complex than this narrow understanding. Some people can function with addiction and mental illness who may or may not need housing assistance. Some people become homeless for other reasons, like being elderly, being disabled, escaping an abusive relationship, loss of a job, being priced out of the housing rental market, and the cost of living outpacing wage growth. None of these scenarios are meant to be addressed by a treatment-first approach, and some people aren't going to meet the conditions for keeping their housing in this model. Then what? Once again, we are back to a poop on the kitchen counter approach for handling the homeless crisis. So, why does it seem we're stuck to never fully commit to eradicating the problem? A lot of it stems from the populace not being able to give up on how we think the world should work, so much so that they welcome a greater charge upon municipal government and prefer to keep ourselves hostage to the unsightly Gothic depravity of homelessness. To be clear, while unconditional housing delivers a radical restructuring and efficiency in use of local resources, there is valid doubt whether housing first can be counted on to fully pay for itself. One of the greatest obstacles in implementing a housing first solution is in startup costs to make housing units available. Through grant money, wealthy benefactors, and charitable giving from individuals willing to make progress possible, we have already taken tens of thousands off the streets nationally. But for the best effect, an aggressive combined state and federal response is required. But is the task worthwhile if housing first doesn't entirely pay for itself? In a civilization that culturally values defense supremacy and fiscally prioritizes it as such as ours, U.S. General George Marshall pontificated that peace requires the same qualities of discipline and sacrifice as war. In our war on homelessness, if we were to redirect our resources and invest in combating homelessness instead of combating the homeless, we will indeed find it is within our reach and that we are only limited by our ambition. It makes no moral or business sense for us to continue handling this crisis much the way we have been. Poop belongs in the toilet, and people belong in homes. I'm Denny Frager with Frager University.